have dozens of pinwheels spinning outside the Willow Tree Cornerstone Child Advocacy Center in Green Bay. Part of a national campaign called Pinwheels that is, for prevention, aimed at bringing awareness to child abuse and neglect. Emily Riley tells us more about what these pinwheels mean and how you can be a part of the solution.
While pinwheels typically represent amusement and enjoyment, today they hold a different meaning. Each of these 144 pinwheels, planted in the ground by volunteers, represent a child that was helped at the center so far this year due to alleged sexual or physical abuse, neglect, or other maltreatment.
We hope it brings awareness, but also motivates people to reach out to a child or their family who may be in need.
Roughly 5,000 suspected cases of child abuse are reported in Brown County in a typical year. Beyond spreading awareness, Holly Fisher, the director at Family Services of Northeast Wisconsin, says people in the community can help by simply being a trusted and supportive adult to children.
So it really takes the whole community, not just law enforcement and child protective services, but also mental health therapy, ongoing follow-up support, and prevention education in our schools.
Fisher says while there isn't one set indicator of child abuse, there are possible warning signs to be aware of.
Does their behavior seem out of the ordinary? Are they usually more outgoing and suddenly they're withdrawn? Are they having difficulties in school? Are they not wanting to go to a certain family member's house anymore?
If so, Fisher recommends having a conversation with your child and reaching out to Family Services if needed. The organization hopes these pinwheels will send a message to the community, reminding people to do their part in preventing abuse. In Green Bay, Emily Riley, Action 2 News.